Welcome everyone, welcome to the show Getting Naked with Happiness. I am Stephen Liu, and today we have a very special guest, and her name is Judith Francis Wurtenbrock. Judith is a survivor of September 11th, a tragedy that shocked the world. A number of terrorism acts occurred that day, and that led to the loss of 3,000 over lives. Judith was working in one of the towers in the World Trade Center when the attacks happened. Today, Judith will be sharing some of her experiences and how she emerged from that trauma to becoming a resilience champion today. So please join me to welcome Judith to the show. Welcome, Judith.
Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you for being here. And I would like to ask you maybe perhaps to share with us a little bit about your background.
I am the fifth child of 7. I was born in St. Vincent. It's a tiny island in the Caribbean. So if you think of where Barbados, Grenada, St. Lucia, Trinidad and Tobago, it's in the chain of the Lesser Antilles. And I moved to the United States as a teenager to finish high school. And my mom, particularly, my parents were very much into education, but my mom really pushed for us to get to America so we can have higher education, go to college. That was a big thing for her, and it's something that I value to this day. Hence, the reason I'm sitting here with you, because it's very important for me. It doesn't matter what media we use, but as long as we're educating others with, it's a personal story or a professional one, anything we can use within our lives to educate others, I think it's important for us to do so.
And I would like to also ask you, because you mentioned to me previously, because we have a previous conversation, and there's a specific event that happened to you in 1983.
Yes.
Would you like to share with us a little bit more about that too?
In 1983, I had made a decision to go into the military, and I did not discuss this with anyone in my family. Now, when you think of a teenager communicating to their family members that I'm going into the military and they haven't given permission, most parents would flip out. So I shared this news with my mom and my siblings, and there was a lot of physical violence, and I ended up falling out of a window.
Falling out of a window.
I fell out of the window because I was trying to escape the fighting that was going on in the home as a result of hearing this news. And I fell out of a window 2.5, almost 3 flights up, and ended up fracturing my lower back. So the reason for me that this is important is that the same legs that I used on the morning of September 11th to run out are the legs where, after that fall, the doctor, whom I waited for about 8 hours, came in and said to me, "Young lady, I think you're very lucky. I think you'll walk again." And for me, years later, I look back at that event and think, this is not luck. I was able to walk again. I wasn't paralyzed.
Could you share with us a little bit about that day? In particular, like what happened maybe in the morning before everything?
The morning of September 11th, it was... May I go back a little bit?
Please.
Because on the Labor Day weekend, which was less than 2 weeks before, my mother and younger brother had visited me in New York, and we took my nephew and nieces to the plaza of the World Trade Center. And my mother sat there looking up at the towers, and she said, I could hear her question even before she spoke. Then she said, "Judy, what would you do if something happened up there?" And I said, "Mommy, please, can we just look at the kids playing and enjoy the evening. And she said, no. What will you do if something happens up there? And I know she was thinking of February 26th, 1993, the first attacks on the World Trade Center. And I could see her just there, because she and I were looking at the event with the snowfall from her bedroom. We were watching television, and I could see just her non-verbal, what was going on. And I said, Mommy, I'll cross that bridge when I get there. So on the morning of September 11th, here I was. I got dressed and I headed out to perhaps what was the most beautiful day that I had ever experienced in New York. Blue skies, perfect blue skies. And remarking to myself that I really have to make sure we enjoy the day. So I got to work about 8:40. I'm walking in, and as I'm walking in, 8:40, 8:42, I get to the elevator. I'm waiting there for Larry, the security person who I later learned had died. And I get up to the floor, and I'm looking out. So I'm walking in and I'm looking uptown. Tower 1 is on the side. And I see this thing, and I'm not sure what it is I see. So then I go into my boss's office and I'm remarking on the beauty of the day, and tried to look out, but his blinds were closed. And I left his office after about 2 minutes, and I'm now opening my cabinet drawer, which had my work shoes, heels. And there was this thing, object of destruction, entering Tower 1. And as it entered, you can tell that it's going in, it's sweeping in. And what was coming out were paper just flying about and furniture and whatnot. And then I shouted, oh my God, what are we going to do? And a few people heard me and run. And then my mother's question, Judy, what would you do? So it was almost like a moment being shaken in that split second of this panic that hit for seconds, screaming, what are we going to do? Mommy's question. The heat on my face, like my face was melting, like my skin was just going, because it's just glass and steel that separates a person from the next tower. And I'm looking down on it, and her question, and then I go back to my boss's office and I shake him and I said his name, what are we going to do? And he literally just stood there with his arms down. And then I came down the hall, looked to see whose office lights were on and whose were not. I remember asking my boss as well about my mentor, Erica. And he said, don't worry, Erica is not in today. She's not in until 10 o'clock. Well, Erica, being Erica, was in at about 8:30 or so. So she died on September 11th. And then I did a quick assessment of who were in their offices or not based on if the lights were on. Then Louisa, a colleague, was coming out of the president's office. They had a global meeting going on. And I called to her, and she vacillated a little bit, and I ushered her to come to me. And she came and she said, everything is in my office, my Bible, everything is in my office. And I said, we need to leave now. And she said, but my children, I said her name, and I said, we need to leave. And when I said now, I don't know if she sensed an urgency in me, but now. So then we are standing at the receptionist desks, and everybody's asking, where is Jackie, the receptionist? Shouldn't we get her to call down to security to find out what's going on? While other individuals are coming, Miss Francis, what should we do? And it's like, get out of the building, we'll deal with it later. Only to learn later that Jackie had taken the elevator down. So we were standing there, and I was delayed about 6 minutes because this is the watch I was wearing. And as I'm looking at the watch and I'm thinking, I started smelling jet fuel. I'm thinking, jet fuel, what is that? What is that? And here, it's like, get to a stairwell. And on the 4th of September, I believe it was the 4th, going to work and coming up from security because my paperwork was being completed for a permanent job with Aon, the company I worked for at the time. And on my way back upstairs, like you see that exit sign at the bottom, there was a little C.
C.
A C,
okay.
The letter C. And I don't know if it was, to some degree still don't know if it was the center staircase or A, B, C stairwell. But that morning, I happened to have gotten into the elevator, the stairwell, sorry. That was the only stair bank that went all the way down. Whereas the other 2 stair banks, you had to change and get into another bank that would take you down.
Wow.
There were people who were stuck from the upper to the lower in trying to change stair banks. It's like the elevator banks were the same thing. You had to change stair banks and elevator banks on the 78th floor and then go from there to the other stair bank to get all the way down to concourse, the concourse level.
And C goes all the way to from the top to the bottom.
It's either C or B.
Which floor were you working on?
I was on the 102nd floor of Tower 2. So it was the building that was hit second, but it's the one that went down first. About 3 to 5 minutes after I got out.
From the impact, from the first plane that came in, and to the time that you went to your boss office and dragged him and Louisa out of the office, what was your reaction time, can I ask?
To actually getting into the stairwell, because when I shook him and told him we need to get out of here, he stood there. So he took the elevator out. Louisa and I took the stairwell. And between that impact that I'm looking at in Tower 1 to getting into the stairwell where there were bottlenecks of people, that was about 6 minutes.
Okay.
Listening to the overhead, please return to your offices. We have everything under control. This is what we were waiting for Jackie to tell us. What should we do? What's going on? What should we do? I have come to learn that overhead was an automatic response system. And many people waited. Many people paused. Some went to the roof, perhaps hoping for a rooftop evacuation. Some returned to their offices. Some stood. Some took the elevator. I ran. Louisa and I ran. I had asked her to go ahead of me, and I held one of her hands with my left hand, and with my right hand I touched every person I passed, because there was just this thing in my spirit that said no one should feel alone in this time. And so for me, every person I passed, I felt it was important to touch them, because it was also a sense that we don't know what we were running into or running away from. I just know I had smelled the jet fuel. What is that? What does that mean for us? And then getting to the 86th floor, turning onto the 85th floor. So there is this turning, 2 flights of stairs to each floor. So coming down from 86. So you go and then you turn and you're coming down to 85th. And as I'm touching the 85th, here's somebody with the door open and he's on the phone. Oh, I think it was a missile. And I said, and to this day, I honestly don't know if I said it out loud. If it was a missile, wouldn't you want to get the hell out of here? And here was the second thing entering, breaking the wall. So this color wall actually, and the plane is coming in, the thing is coming in.
You saw it like right in front.
We see the walls breaking, right? And everything spilling into the stairwell. And I released my colleague's hand and I took off. I took off. I got to the 70th floor and I stopped. I stopped with, again, here was a question. What are you doing? How are you going to explain to her family that you were together and now she's gone and you are not? So I stopped, because for me the question wasn't that I lived, you know, how could you have lived and she didn't? It's, you were together. You have to explain to her family why she died and you're alive. Because if you're alive and the two of you together, you would live. So I stopped.
What were some of your thoughts and initial thoughts and feelings when the plane came into the building right in front of you?
It wasn't so much thoughts and feelings. It was my mother's question. It was my face is on my face. My skin is melting. It's, my hair is singeing. It's the things that are, and snapping out of it with her question back to me. I've just looked at my nephew and nieces, my mom and my younger brother, and we're playing. And in this place, the plaza of the World Trade Center, I was afraid of heights, but yet I worked on 102nd floor. And it was, where are my colleagues? I mean, even being into work at that hour of the morning, it was a colleague of mine asking me the evening before, Monday, September 10th, if I would come in and do a presentation for him. And I said, yes, of course. So normally I would be arriving at work at 9 o'clock, and if I had, I wouldn't be sitting here. So I came into work a little bit earlier, and Glenn was across the street shopping for his wife, who was pregnant. So my thoughts were a million a minute. It was, where are my colleagues? It was my mother's question. It was, I will never see my nephew and nieces again. It was, dreams. And when I say dreams, I think of my military experience. I think of, despite the ugly start to that, the beauty that unfolded. In my time, I was on my own. I didn't have, you know, family members telling me what to do or not to do. It was discovering me while out there in the world on my own. So it's dreams, yes. There's so much more. I remember thinking that I traveled to escape, but we can't escape ourselves. So now I travel to discover the parts of me that are yet to be discovered.
When you were going down the stairway, C or B, at a point after the plane crashed, what happened after?
Running down the stairs, I stood on the 70th floor waiting for my colleague. She caught up to me, and this time I ran in front of her and held her with this hand, and we're going down. And when we got to the 66th floor, there were firemen going up, and we asked them not to go up. And their responses were, it's our duty. It's our job. How could we not? And you knew. How could you not know that they're going up to their deaths, right? Mm. They're going to where we had just escaped, from where we had just escaped. And, when you hear that 343 firemen died, this is something So we just keep running. They're going up, in the middle of people going down, they're going up. We get to the concourse level and security is downstairs. And when we hit the concourse level, the only thing we heard was, and it's clear what it is. It's like fuselage, it's furniture, it's building parts dropping on the plaza of the World Trade Center where my mom, my brother Mervyn, and my nephew and nieces, where we were just Labor Day weekend before. And I remember security telling us to go out a certain way on Liberty Street, and I thought, no, I don't know that way. Let's go this way, because this is the path I took every morning coming in from the PATH train. Let's go this way. And we stood on the sidewalk for a moment, looking, and we looked up. There was a police photographer there capturing what had just occurred. I learned last year that he died. And we stood there telling people to run because the buildings were going to drop. But it's only later that I looked back and realized the shock that people were in, because people just stood there and we were shouting to them, run, run, get out of the area, the buildings are going to fall. But you look up and there's the cauliflower cloud forming.
The
smoke. And it's dark, billowing smoke, but in between you can see the beauty, the orange of fire, which I love. Sunsets, right? But at the same time, realizing the horror of it and looking at the building and looking at the ground, the streets, and thinking the buildings are going to fall, and if they fall, we're in the way. We're in the line of fire. So she and I we shouted to people to get out of the area. As I said, it is, what it was, and people just stood there. And we took off. We prayed for a little bit at the cemetery next door, and we ran up on Broadway, and on the way running, here is a bus coming down, and I'm like, Louisa, it's an NYU school bus. I went to NYU, let's get on. And I'm banging on the door, and the driver came off the bus, and he stood, he's like, what's going on down there? And I said, can't you see? And I said, please, let's get out of the area. And he got back on the bus, and as we looked, we thought, no, couldn't be, because we thought the buildings were going to fall this way. But apparently it was imploding, the building we had just gotten out of, but we didn't stand and waited to see. So I asked the driver, I said, anyone that's on the street, can you please stop to pick them up? So a young man came on, he was about 32, 35, he's with his radio on and whatnot, and he said, Tower 2 is going down. And we looked at each other and said, oh, it is. And then a woman came on, and she sat across from us, and she said, I can't imagine that anyone was in the towers. And we kind of looked at her, and we said we were just there.
At the point of time when you were in the bus, you asked the bus driver to stop and to get people off the streets.
Yes.
I just want to comment that was very considerable for you to do so, because at a time of crisis like that, many people have fled.
For me, it was simply, if there's anybody on the street, especially when I looked at the driver who initially got off the bus and he's looking, and I'm thinking, what are you doing? Let's get out of the area. And I stood up and Luis is like, why, what are you doing? And I said, we need to get people off the street. And I said, please, can you stop anybody that's on the street, because they're safer in the bus than on the street, because people are looking at what's going on. And chances are, this for me it's like seconds, it's going. People need to be off the street. That's all I thought about.
It seems to me that speaking about survival and compassion in the darkest times of where you need to survive, even when you're going down the stairway, you're still touching everybody, making sure that everybody felt you, that they're being reassured and comforted. And when you're down there at the ground floor, by entering the bus and getting everyone on board, it speaks volumes about you being very compassionate even at the darkest times. I wonder where that strength came from, if you would like to share.
I think it comes from having felt alone for so long. I'm from a family of 7, but I've always felt alone. And it was just, for me, even throughout my military service, that it's not a good place. It's not a good place to be. I mean, a family of 7 and feeling alone is quite telling. So it was simply about that. This is horrific. And it just came from within. It was.
To me, that is a sign of hope and inspiration, where maybe you may not like this word, but I'll say a hero emerges at the darkest time, and you come out to share your light of resilience and strength and courage. And what you just shared with us took a lot of courage to share.
And a friend of mine in New York, Keith, that's his name for me. He calls me a hero. Sometimes he would just send a text message wishing my hero a happy birthday, or Merry Christmas to my hero. He's like, you need to realize that what you did, this is you. So receive it.
So after that event, do you stay in New York?
After that, I stayed in New York for about 18 months. I left New York on March 31st, 2003, following months of therapy, which continued even after I moved to California. Following my father's death, which occurred January 4th, 2003, which was another matter altogether.
And where do you go?
I moved to California, Southern California. I didn't have a job, didn't drive, didn't own a car, didn't know anyone.
Okay.
So Los Angeles, where you absolutely need to have a car, I moved to California. For me, my plan was simply to escape and start over.
A plan B.
Different name. I planned on just disappearing. I didn't want anyone to know what I had just escaped. I wanted no questions about my past. I wanted to just have a new name, new identity, new everything. And what better opportunity? But I had my nephew and nieces in New York.
Do you go back to the World Trade Center after that fateful day?
Immediately after I did initially occasionally with a niece or my nephew Eric, who live in New York. And then my sister had gotten pregnant, and when she left her job, her boss offered me the opportunity to temp as a temporary consultant in her role. And during lunch, I would go downstairs, and sometimes after work, I'd go downstairs and just stand and listen.
Mm.
And in listening, you would hear the hearts, you would hear the pain that people were living, even if they didn't have relatives in the World Trade Center, even if they didn't have a friend. It was visitors to New York who would come and just cry and pour out. And often my question would be, did you know anyone who worked there? Did you have a family member there? It wasn't about eavesdropping on them. It was what they were going through in that moment. For me, I had an opportunity to bring peace. I had an opportunity to bring comfort. So often it was, did you have a family member? Did you have a friend, a colleague, or whatever working there? And most often the response was, no, I'm just visiting from Australia, I'm visiting from Sweden, I'm visiting from Nigeria, wherever. And the same question the woman asked on the bus. I can't imagine that anyone survived this. And here I was with an opportunity to say, I survived. Someone survived. You can actually touch this person who survived.
And you say that you were in therapy for many months.
Years.
Years.
Because even after I moved to California, I continued therapy. My first therapy session was the first week of October 2001. And I went to an orthopedist every other day for electrical stimuli to my feet. I saw an acupuncturist. I saw my psychologist for twice a week. I went to the gym every day, worked out for 2 to 3 hours. Excuse me, I refused to take medication. That was my choice, right?
Wow.
It's not to say that medication wasn't necessary. Dr. Locke looked at me, and her first thing for me in caring about me was, Judith, you need to be medicated. This is too much. I know I was off the wall. I referred to that time as my period of insanity. And I can say that with a smile because I saw myself. I remember attending a Mount Sinai disaster psychiatry conference, and I went as patient and psychologist, and I had to wear the hats of both because I needed to see myself, and I needed to see myself. So sitting among a room of people who were dealing with something they had never faced in life. It was April 2002.
Can you share with us what are some of the signs and symptoms of post-traumatic stress disorder? Because I note that you were being diagnosed with this.
PTSD.
PTSD.
Yeah. For me, the very first thing that showed up was panic attacks, which I had about 7, 8, 10, 11, 12 times a day. And one may say, how could that be? But I could be on the bus and be triggered, somebody looking at me and be triggered, people just asking or saying, I'm so sorry you went through that. So you wear your trauma where if they're individuals who have gone through something, they can pretty much tell that this person before me is going through. So anxiety attacks, panic attacks, you can say they're one and the same. For me, the panic attack is about the intensity. And anxiety, I could feel it rising in my body. And I remember educating my friends, and the same friend in particular who would call me a hero, asking him specifically, I said, that same humor, I need it. When you feel an anxiety, when you can look at me and see that something is coming on, because I don't want it to get into a panic attack, inject humor. Inject something that would just get me out of this space of cycles where I would just spiral down. Nightmares, which my first nightmare was about 2 a.m. the morning of September 12th. Loss of appetite. For me, I needed to change pretty much everything I ate. Something as simple as a banana, which I really liked. Bananas for me were very calming. Now there were a few food that was high in potassium and creates anxiety. I mean, there's so many different symptoms that different people experience, and I think the difficulty breathing, not being able to sleep. I had lots of headaches. A person experiencing signs and symptoms of PTSD, we don't all experience the same thing, but it's important to recognize that this is not normal for everyday functioning. So recognizing, even at the onset, I'll be at work, and I could be talking to a colleague, and something would happen down the hall, and I'd have racing thoughts. I could feel my body changing, right? And recognizing, it's knowing oneself well enough to recognize what's about to come. And for me, that was key. What's about to come on? And I'd go to the bathroom, turn on the shower, the tap, and stick my hand onto the water, because water has always been very calming for me. My mother would take us to the beach as children, and for me, the water was just that. It was about calming down and getting to a sense of comfort and peace. The racing thoughts, I would go to the gym as a way, instead of taking medication, I'd go to the gym every day, 2 to 3 hours, and work out, so I can have that shift with the adrenaline that was pumping. I mean, signs and symptoms of post-traumatic stress. Name them. Check. You don't go through something like this. I did not recognize myself. How is that?
I appreciate your courage to share this with us. It means a lot to me. Thank you. And what are some of the thoughts about trauma for those who are still dealing with their own trauma? Could you share maybe a thought about, will the trauma go away if some people do not do anything about it?
No, it doesn't go away. I mean, I look at the thing that really struck me when I'd walk the streets of New York is how many Vietnam veterans, having served in the military, how many Vietnam veterans were on the streets, how many people were homeless on the streets of New York. And all I could think about is, what is our government doing? What can we do to care for these individuals, these men and women who had served this country? Trauma doesn't go away if you don't address it. You know, the ugliness of life
does not automatically depart because we want it to. If you do not face your fears in life, guarantee you they will haunt you for the rest of your life. So my thing is, confront that ugliness. I know it's hard. I know that. I've been there over and over. But if you never confront your fears in life, you will be haunted by them. It doesn't matter what it is. And I'm having so many, flashbacks, signs and symptoms of PTSD, flashbacks. And it's not just about September 11th, it's about when people try to terrorize you, when people, there's so many things that can traumatize us. It isn't simply about something so humongous. You've got people who've been raped, you've got people who've gone through physical abuse, battered women syndrome. There is physical and sexual abuse. There's so many things for which we can be traumatized and left with signs and symptoms of PTSD.
It's very important for people to speak up and to get help. I think, it's very important for that to step forward and not to live in that darkness and to know that they're not alone. There are other people out there who are ready to help them or who are in the same situation that they want to come out and feel safe and to reach out for help.
Yeah. There's, for me, I've always felt like I've been silenced. So even sitting here today or, back immediately after 9/11 when friends at NBC suggested the Dateline NBC interviews or speaking at conferences in California, for somebody who's been silenced or have felt silenced her whole life, to be called to speak, the only thing I can say to people who have been traumatized is to speak. You may feel like you're too vulnerable. And I remember one of my pastors saying, I think we put you out there too soon, because when you moved to California, you were still so fragile. And I said, we can judge that and say it was too soon because we care. I know you care. I know you and your wife care about me. But it was when it was. And the simple fact that I had so many people around me who cared, these were perfect strangers, who knew what I had gone through. And they used it as an opportunity to minister to others. And for me, that was the important piece. If others can be brought comfort, if you will, there's a scripture that talks about, we will comfort you with the comfort that you've been comforted. And if anyone is listening to this who can recognize him or herself in what I am saying, I will say, please confront this darkness that continues to haunt you. Because until you do, you're giving voice to that thing and not to the strength that is in you to overcome that thing and crush it.
Well said.
Yeah.
And that's part of building resilience.
Yeah.
And the very first step is to recognize with awareness. And it's scary despite the emotional fragility that you're faced. And there are so many good reasons in your head telling you not to do so. Because there's all fear being trapped in that traumatic experience.
Yeah.
And how will you define resilience in a simplified way?
For me, the simplest way is and it doesn't come overnight.
Okay.
Right? But for me, it's being able to get up again and moving on. For me, it's looking at whatever the traumatic experience is, whatever it is, and seeing beauty in that darkness and saying, I am going to overcome. And giving strength to, it's not about me, it's giving strength to whatever I know is in me and saying, you're not going to win. Yes, I will feel a heaviness for a while, but I get up.
Making the choice
yes,
to get up.
Choosing to get up. And if you don't, yeah, you're going to wither and die, and you're going to give voice to that thing that is choosing, you have allowed to overcome you.
One piece of advice to give to people who are still suffering or still in some sort of trauma, what would that be?
If there's anyone at all that you trust, speak to that individual. Allow that individual to help you to find your voice so you can speak, so you can get to the other side of the difficulty that you're going through. For me, the only person, I shouldn't say the only person, because I had my nephew who was 11, 12, my nieces who were 9 and then 6, my youngest brother. I had a handful of people and my therapist, right? So if we have at least one person who is a source of strength, as long as that individual or individuals can handle, because not everybody can handle it. My therapist said, you can't expect your family members to understand where you are. So if you have at least one person, and that was my therapist, who can walk through with you what you're going through, confide everything you can in that one person and have them walk with you. Do not play games, because if you play games, you're screwing up your own healing, your own process. Confide 100% in that one individual and let them help you through this to get to the next level where you build your circle. That's when I moved to California. Despite my therapist saying, you can't do this, it's too soon. Build that circle where you have people you can trust and confide in. And then just keep building so you can get to another place in your healing process.
For those who are listening in, could you share a piece of advice to those who are in their 20s, who are still finding a direction of meaning or purpose in their life? How would you advise?
The thing that really, and I would say hurt me, because I see my nephew and nieces in this light as well. And they're my heart, is to build human relationships, face to face, not the text messaging. Build relationships with people, heart to heart, eye to eye. Build relationships where if you are going through something, anything, someone can look at you, because you don't know if you'll have the strength, the courage, whatever it takes to actually verbalize what you're feeling or what you have gone through, what the experience is. Build those human connections where the individuals in your circle, 1, 2, 3 people, can look at you and know that something is wrong, something has happened.
Having that human connection, collaboration and relationship is really important for our healing. And Judith, I would like to acknowledge your dedication and mission for spreading resilience, and through your story you have inspired hope and courage to many of us. And resilience is a skill that we all need to acquire, need to build, and need to promote. And speaking up is really very important. So Judith, thank you for being here. Let me take this opportunity to thank you. And for me, my takeaway from today's conversation is that it's very important for us to speak up, despite the fear, despite the discouragement and anxiety, it's good for us to step forward to speak to somebody who's close to us so that we can find that voice.
Yes.
And for those of you who are listening in, please let me know if you have any thoughts or any comments or what are the resilient skill sets that you have learned from this conversation. And last but not least, I would like to share that by being here today on this show, Getting Naked with Happiness is very powerful, and I thank you for your participation in this, because Getting Naked with Happiness is about speaking and sharing these experiences of pain and suffering so that we could be naked mentally and emotionally, because we want to address mental health issues from a collective way. It's a collective symptom that we all share as a population, as a world, and we're not looking at it as a personalized weakness or flaw.
Right.
So by being here, you're empowering us to do so that we can encourage this healing together.
Take your voice back.
Take your voice back. Thank you very much, Judith, for being here.
Absolutely.
And for those of all of you, have a great week ahead, and goodbye.